Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again. In this YouTube astrological segment, I'm going to be dissertating and talking about water signs dominant in a natal chart. Now, most of you know the water signs are Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces. And when I say water dominant, obviously the emphasis on it, majority of the planets, and also including the ascendant and midheaven in water. So, for example, if somebody had 3 planets, or let's say 4 planets in water, and they had their ascendant in water, and then they had, say, like 3 air, 3 fire, and 1 earth, that would mean that you'd have the majority of your influences in water signs. Now, somebody that has is dominated by water in their natal chart can obviously be strongly sensitive, may be very strongly emotional. They're more about feelings and picking up perhaps thoughts of others a little stronger than people that don't have water dominant natal charts. They're more the sensitivity obviously can be very strong. You look at water signs are sensitive to their environment. They're very environmental. They're a little bit more impressionable on average than the other elements, so there would be a little stronger inclination toward, I guess you could say, having that attribute in them to some degree. Now, if somebody, say, had majority of their planets and influences in water, and they had the preponderance of energy in water in their chart, but say even had, like, say, for example, a moon in Gemini and or Gemini rising, now this may offset this to some degree, because Gemini is a sign obviously that's it's about being objective and can be very non-emotional, or at least appear that way. Geminis, don't get me wrong, I've explained before that Geminis can actually experience a manifold feelings and emotions, but at least on the surface it's not always expressed as strongly, and being an air sign, it is very intellectual and objective, so the emotion that could modify the effects, for example, of somebody with a water dominant horoscope. Now, I think when I look at one example of somebody with a water dominant chart, the late great Robin Williams. Now, he had, I believe, he had 4 planets in water, and then he had the ascendant in Scorpio. He also had two grand trines in water, and he had those configurations on top of it. Majority of his planets were actually above the horizon, and they were in houses 7 through 12. So he was obviously more gregarious and more extroverted than your typical water dominant chart. And his 3 majors were also in water. He had Sun in Cancer, Moon in Pisces, and Scorpio ascendant. So he obviously, even if he didn't show the emotions that much to us, it's safe to say he was very more sensitive and more emotional, I believe, than what maybe it was revealed. Having Scorpio rising tends to control their emotions. Their exterior is somewhat can be controlled, and what that tells me is that he had probably a lot more than what he was, I guess you could say, disclosing on the surface, because Scorpio rising can be very intensely emotional, but they often conceal, camouflage the feelings, and they don't always show it. But they're, being a water sign, it can be very emotional and sensitive. And having those 2 grand trines in water, and yes, I count the ascendant in the grand trine, some people don't, but I do. And it's always important to take the whole chart in perspective and consideration when you look at when you're delineating a chart and looking for a strong emphasis. When you see that emphasis, like if you have the majority of planets, say whether it's water, air, earth, or fire, that statement, I mean, that is true. Somebody will have, if somebody had like 6 planets in water, for example, and they didn't have, in all the other elements they had a smaller quantity, that would be considered an air, say, a water dominant chart. If you had 6, and then the rest of the elements were less than 6, yes, that is water dominant. But at the same time, let's say if those water signs were in the mutable houses, such as most of them say were in the 3rd, 6th, 9th, and or 12th houses, it would indicate that maybe those energies wouldn't be expressed as strongly, because many of you may know this, but planets can lose their energy a little bit in mutable houses. So all those factors have to be taken into consideration. And the water element, being water, and I'm not, I know maybe some people are going to write me and say, well, I have all these water signs and this didn't happen. Being the fact that water signs are more impressionable than the other elements, there may be a slightly stronger proclivity toward possible, I guess you could say, like the alcohol and recreational drug use. And at the same time, you have to look at the whole chart and take it into perspective. If somebody had 6 planets in water, but they had like a fixed T-square, in their chart, and had a strong fixed element, that could modify or tone down that tendency immensely. See, I have water dominant chart. I have 3 planets in Cancer. My North Node is in Pisces, and I also have Neptune in Scorpio, which is generational planet. It's not that significant, but at the same time, I have 2 long fixed T-squares in my chart, and I haven't touched anything like that in years. So, and if I told you the amount of years, you wouldn't probably believe me anyway, but I just, that's pretty much the way it is for me. And also, my Sun and Mars in Cancer are in the 3rd house, so that kind of tones the energy down a little bit, because that is an immutable house. So anyway, people, that'll conclude this YouTube astrological segment for water signs dominant in a natal chart. And stay tuned next time, where I'll be dissertating and talking about earth signs dominant in a natal horoscope. 2 things I want to get with you on before I head out. Firstly, the stars may impel, but do not compel. And secondly, never isolate any single astrological element, aspect, planetary placement, position, configuration, influence, or what have you, and make an analysis of a person, astrologically speaking, based on this alone, because a person astrologically is the sum of all their components in their natal chart, and not just one. Until next time, people, stay well.